Hello. Our objective for the video is how to establish and organize a patient's medical record. Have you ever been in a grocery store, your local grocery store, you just know where everything is located, and if you go to a different grocery store, or even if your new one decides to remap the grocery store, that trip takes a little longer now because you have to locate the things that you needed. You're running down the aisles, you're rushing in, and you know the bread is in aisle 2, but now it's in aisle 4, and the bread that you want, they don't have it at that store that you're shopping. So medical records is a little like that because when you have different facilities and you have different ways of doing things, you may look for a certain item that you need, and it may not be where you want it, where you need it located. So with the onset of documentation guidelines and the increase of medical record audits, it's important that proper medical record systems be used. It assists with assessing patients' conditions and provides with critical information. It furnishes statistical information, protects against liability suits, and is key to quality care. Medical record information is available through a data retrieval system that provides computer readouts so that traditional patient charts can be updated constantly. Let's review again why accuracy is so important to medical records. It helps in the diagnosis and treatment. They provide written documentation of care. It ensures continuity of care. They verify medical necessity. They assist in research. It substantiates billing codes, complies with laws, and defends the physician in case of a liability suit. Paper-based medical records, they still exist, and for some practices, it's better for them to keep using the paper-based systems. But they're inefficient, they're easy to misplace and misfile, costly to manage, move, and store. I remember when I worked in a hospital, and the staff would always talk about the salt mines and records, and I was wondering, why do they call it the salt mines? And there's actually a place in Kansas that was an old salt mine used to house records because salt mines are dry, so it helped protect the records, and it was a large storage place where you could file records. So patient records from the past, they would be stored in the salt mines. Also, people feel secure with a hard copy of information in hand. While converting to an electronic system for some practices, they may maintain a hybrid type of system, a system where the patient can receive printouts, but it's mostly computer-based, electronic-based. So, I worked in a practice that had used paper medical records before we switched to AMRs and EHRs, and we'll discuss that later. So, before the next day, I would prepare new patient records, and I would have my whole desk cleared out. Anything that did not have to do with those records, I would clear away. I would have a stack of blank folders. I would have a stack of blank sheets to put in those. I would have all of my labels all prepared so that I could just have the process set and the charts ready for the patients for the next day. And then medical records would bring down our existing patients. So I organized my workspace. I selected a file folder. I created the labels for the folder and the paperwork because everything had to be labeled. As you can see in the photo, there were certain tabs that correspond to the patient's medical record number. So we filed and labeled those according to the guidelines. I would adhere any allergy labels And if the patient did not have any allergies, I would place NKDA on the chart. No known drug allergies. And then I will insert the blank forms, which have the patient's label on them for better tracking. Healthcare reform was needed to improve the quality and safety of healthcare. In that way, healthcare reform means better care for everyone. The Health Information Technology for Economic and Clinical Health, HITECH Act, encourage providers to adopt electronic health records and improve privacy and security protections for healthcare data. This was achieved through financial incentives for adopting EHRs and increased penalties in violations of the HIPAA privacy and securities rules. You have also heard the term meaningful use. It was defined by the use of certified EHR technology in a meaningful manner. For example, electronic prescriptions. That would be a meaningful use, because when we receive our scripts electronically, it cuts down on one, trying to decipher what someone else wrote down in their own handwriting. It also gives a way to track scripts. And just like the other day, I have a refill pop up. Everything was handled electronically. I had it set up a while ago, and the pharmacy let me know it's ready for pickup. So that helped. The meaningful use helped in that process. It also ensures that certified EHR technology connects in a manner that provides for electronic exchange of health information to improve the quality of care. EMR and EHR. Sometimes you may have heard these terms used interchangeably, but they're actually two separate terms. Let's go over what they mean. EMR, electronic medical record. They're a digital version of the paper chart that contains all of the patient's medical history from one practice. So when you think of an EMR, you would think of for one clinic, for one practice. They record the services that store the entire data of each patient in electronic format. And they contain the standard medical and clinical data gathered in one provider's office. Now, what is an EHR? EHR, electronic health record. Electronic health record allows a patient's health record to move with other healthcare providers, specialists, hospitals, and nursing homes, so that Dr. Smith in Clinic A and Dr. John in Hospital B, they can share that same information on the one patient. That helps with continuity of care. That helps with accuracy, because you know that the same information that came from the first doctor is passed on to the next. It offers a more comprehensive view of the patient's history, giving the acting physician a better understanding of the patient's condition and past treatment. So my gastro doctor would share the information or have in the EHR that's accessible to my primary care doctor, and they would be able to share it with another physician. So having all of those interconnected helps with diagnosis and treatment, and all of the reasons why we needed accuracy, it's also needed for continuity of care. It also goes beyond the data collected in the provider's office and includes a more comprehensive patient history. So I have a well-rounded view of my medical history. Remember the process that was discussed earlier to create a paper medical record, where I had to clear off my desk and print off labels and had all my files. Also, I had to make sure we had enough supplies to handle the task, and then taking the time to compile everything. Let's see how that varies with the electronic medical record. When a new patient calls the office, I verify that they are a new patient by checking name, date of birth, social, address, any other aliases. And when I find out that it is indeed a new patient, create new patient, they are given a medical record number, an electronic chart is created. Easy. When our office has switched from doing paper records to electronic medical records, that was a big task taken off of my desk. Let's review the contents of medical records one more time. We have our patient information form, the medical history, our chief complaint, the history of present illness. It's a detailed account of illness or injury that the patient is being seen for that visit, the past family and social history, the review of symptoms, then our physical exam. We will have progress notes, medical reports, outside tests that may include lab, x-ray, EKG, test results, and other miscellaneous documents like a living will, durable power of attorney, or any correspondence that the patient may send. There are three basic types of medical record organization systems that are used by most physicians. Problem-oriented medical record, POMR. Source-oriented medical record, SOR. And then integrated record, IR. Let's dive a bit deeper into those. Problem-oriented medical record, POMR. It provides an organized and efficient manner in which to handle records. They have a comprehensive way of including all of the information from various sources to help track the patient's health. Let's look a bit deeper into this record. Having a patient's medical record organized and efficient helps with diagnosis and treatment. I'm not flipping through the chart to see where information is located. It's all right there in a comprehensive form for me. As we're taking a look into this a bit deeper, we see that the patient's demographic information is at the top. We see a listing of the patient's permanent problems and the dates. We see that she has hypertension, she's diabetic, and we have all of her permanent problems, and each problem is given a number so that that number can be referred to later in documentation for other ways to keep the records. Then we also have temporary problems. Problems that could come and go depending upon diagnosis or depending upon the treatment plan and the adherence to that plan. So we see the dates and we see the problem numbers. We see that the numbers for the permanent problems have P's and the ones for the temporary are 1s or T's. I'm sorry. The other part of this chart, we show continuing medications. So the medications were given in October and they correspond to the problem numbers. So this medication, the first one, was given for problem number 1. The second, problem number 2, and we go back to problem number 1 for the treatment of, I believe it was hypertension. So she's receiving 2 medications for hypertension. For her temporary medications, we see the date, we see the date that it should stop, and we see the problem number that it corresponds to. So this way we have a clear view of the patient's medications, her long-term issues, her short-term issues, and her demographic information. There was another sheet included. The next part, it shows her who who the patient consulted with, who her primary care consulted with. She was seen by ophthalmologists, she was seen by an ENT, and another ophthalmologist. Also going back to the problem numbers. The problem numbers T1, P4, and P6. You can also see her hospitalizations. She was hospitalized in 1950 for, it says T and A. Normally that would mean tonsils and adenoidectomy. Easy for you to say. And in 1978, a TAH would be a total abdominal hysterectomy. We can see her immunizations and the dates that she received them and her flu shots. We also see up on the top that she's allergic to codeine and sulfa. On the next part of the page, we can see when her PET tests were done, when her mammograms were done, and because Miss Betty is a woman, she would not have a PSA, but males would have a PSA. We can also see that her blood pressure has been checked, the date and the rates of her blood pressure. Moving on from problem-oriented medical records. Source-oriented records. Now, I have pictures here that show many people writing, and that's what it basically is. They document the chart is arranged according to sections. So, for example, there's a H&P, History and Physical section. There are progress notes. There are labs. And so each chart would have, and you mostly see them in paper-based systems, that each chart would have sections. And so if I'm looking for an H&P, I know that the blue section would be H&P. If I'm looking for lab results, I can look in orange. But if I'm looking because the patient is diabetic and I'm looking for a certain test that was done for that, I know to go to labs, but I'm looking for a date. I'm flipping through a lot of records to get to what I need. So I know kind of where it's almost like a puzzle piece. I know I need a blue piece, but which blue piece, it's a little harder to find that information. Each healthcare group maintains its own separate form. They are organized chronologically, and the most recent entry is normally near the front. So my lab test from yesterday would be at the top. The lab test that I had 6 years ago would be closer to the bottom. We often find that the data is fragmented, making it difficult to track problems chronologically with input from different groups of professionals. So it's harder to keep track of those type of records for source-oriented records. And lastly, are integrated records. You mostly find these, they are in chronological order, and it's a mixture of the two, and it's just the files. Like I said, my visit that I had yesterday is kept on top. If I had a problem with blood pressures 5 years ago, the doctor would have to flip back and recall that, oh, she did mention that 5 years ago that she had blood pressure problems, or I said maybe it was 5 or 6. It's really relying upon the memory of the patient and the provider, which in a problem oriented medical record, you really don't have that issue. So the integrated and the source are more chronological, and you're depending upon people's memory, which I know mine sometimes I can't remember what happened in the next room or what I went into the next room to get. So having everything in a comprehensive form where I can easily point out and a number corresponds to that helps with diagnosis, helps with treatment, and helps the patient along their medical journey. So, our objective was how to establish and organize a patient's medical record. We discussed paper medical records, we discussed electronic medical records, and we talked about the differences between an EMR, electronic medical record, and an EHR, electronic health record. We also talked about the High-Tech Act and how that impacted the meaningful use and how that helped to spur on the electronic health record system, and how much easier your schedulers or a medical administrative assistant's life is with the addition of medical records. And if it's easier for us, how much easier it is for our patients to come in to know that the same thing that I've told you here is the same thing that my specialist across the street has the information. So I'm impressed with medical records. I've seen the change, and I love the fact that I don't have to repeat the same thing 5, 6, 7, 8 times to each person I go to or try to remember. So, as you reflect this week on the topic and prepare to do the rest of the work, we want you to use this content, material in your readings, the interactives in your course room, and research of your own using the UMA library or other reliable sources to maximize your learning. Have a great week.